Loren for this very special TED Talk. And he didn't take me up on the offer of doing a commercial, so I'll do my own commercial today. Everyone in this room has a TED Talk within them. So you just let me know when you're ready to share it with the world. We do have a TED Talk specialist in the room, Sarah, so if you want to run through some ideas, or if you want to be interviewed, like speaking in front, you don't have to do, we've had all kinds of different TED Talks, so. But I won't bother you anymore with it. We'll let Loren take it away.
All right. Well, you have all been there sitting in a theater. You've got your program. You're starting to read. The house lights go down and the curtain goes up. And your first impression is, of course, the scenery. What are we in for? Who are these people? Where are we and what are we doing? So I've actually been in a theater where when the curtain went up, there was applause for the scenery. And that can be a good thing or a bad thing. It meant that the set designer might have gone a little over the top in, providing a lot of beautiful details. But there's also the possibility of going to a show and the set doesn't help. It hurts. Okay, there's this guy named Andrew Lloyd Webber, heard of him? He had that little Phantom of the Opera thing that he brought over. Well, in 2005, he thought, well, I've got this one up my sleeve. Let's bring over this other show and maybe I can make even more money. Did anybody go see The Woman in White? Oh. Yeah, Diane was with me. The reason you didn't see The Woman in White is because it had a very short run. Andrew Lloyd Webber flopped. And my opinion is, it wasn't bad news. It was a Victorian thriller. But the reason that it failed is the scenery was too much. The curtain went up and it was all projections, scenic projections on a big wall that was blank in the back. And so you're in the meadow and you're zooming in on a house, the door opens, you're zooming through the door down a hallway into a room, and there's the room, and the wall upstage had some door openings that were just, you couldn't see them, but the picture of the set ended up so that the door lined up with the actual door, so the actors could actually use the door. It was like watching a video game. You completely could not even pay attention to the actors. It was terrible, and that's why it flopped. Okay, so we're going to talk about the evolution of scenery in my life, and what better place to start than the beginning. Oh. It was 1968, Pine City, Minnesota. Diane and I had met in high school and gone to separate colleges in Minnesota. And at the time, school districts sent recruiters, administrators would go out to colleges trying to convince you that their school was the very best place to go get a job. So we were interviewed, we accepted, we signed our contracts, we rented an apartment through the mail and over the phone, and we packed our U-Haul, had our paper fold-out map of Beloit, Wisconsin, and we moved to Beloit, a town that we had never visited. Never had been there. So it was time to let our little adventure begin. Beloit has a population of about 35,000. It's about 100 miles from Chicago, right on the Wisconsin-Illinois border. And Diane was a kindergarten teacher at first, and then later a preschool teacher. And I had my first 8 years I spent in a junior high, teaching speech and theater and English. Then in 1976, my predecessor at the high school retired, and this became my new home, Beloit Memorial High School. And so I spent the next 26 years there as the theater director. So the building was built in 1951, and I lost my place. almost 2,000 students in the school when I was there. And my favorite thing about this picture, okay, where's my little pointer? Right here. The Civil Defense Fallout Shelter sign is still on the building. Nobody's ever taken it down. I just find that truly amazing. In fact, under the balcony, there was a storage closet that even when I arrived in the mid-70s, the civil defense barrels were still in there. Of course, the students had rummaged through them all by that time. But yeah, it was a great building. Okay, next. This is the side view of the building, and anytime you see a theater of any size, you'll notice that there's this tall structure over on where the stage is, and that's because it's called the fly loft. When you have a curtain filling the proscenium opening, and you see that curtain go up, it's got to go somewhere. It's got to go up into the fly loft. So this theater was very well equipped. It had 30 battens or pipes that are parallel, about a foot apart from the front of the stage all the way to the back of the stage. And we'll talk more about counterweights later on. The other theater here is the small theater. It's Elizabeth Reinhold's theater. She was my predecessor. And the beauty of that little space, it's a lovely little space, 200 seats. And it's the home for the Beloit Civic Theater. Now, BCT is in its 91st season, community theater in Beloit. They do 3 shows a year, 9 performances of each show. And after I retired in 2002, I got even more involved in the theater and became the resident set designer and set building coordinator, box office person, senior or season ticket person, website maintenance, yeah, all of that. Advertising, sales. So over the years, I acted and directed many productions also for Beloit Civic Theater. This is the current interior of the big theater. When it was first built, it was 1,468 seats. And then there was a big renovation in the mid-90s where the size of the school was doubled, and a whole lot of things were done to fix up the theater, including new upholstered seats. What else? Oh, one of the things they did is they excavated the orchestra pit. I'll show a picture of the old pit in a moment, but excavated with, bobcats driving around in the theater. So the stage could be extended. And then they also, in 2016, did a whole lot of these acoustical panels to increase the quality of the sound in the theater. So this is looking up into the balcony. So after the renovation in the mid-90s, the seating was reduced to about 1159. And there was another renovation after I retired in 2016 where this row of electrical lights, and there's another one further towards the stage, was added, and it's on an electric winch. So the lights come down to the floor. It's a lot safer to focus the lights. In the back of the theater is the lighting and sound booth. Yeah, it was really a beautiful space. One of the things that before these lights were hanging there are these holes right up here in the ceiling. And that's how you used to focus the lights. The grid backstage was 50 feet up, so there's a steel staircase going to the top, and then you would go out through a door over the auditorium ceiling on catwalks, and then you would lay on your stomach and try to focus the lights through this little hole in the ceiling. It was less than ideal. This is a picture of a set for the play Our Town that I did in the early 80s. Now, some of you may be familiar with that show. Normally it's done on a blank, empty stage, a couple chairs, tables, a couple step ladders. But doing a show without building a set, it just was wrong. So I built a bunch of platforms, and we did it with platforms. But this is what the building looked like when it was built. The original hard plywood seats, very uncomfortable. The ladies always complained because their nylons got snagged. There was an open orchestra pit that was about 5 feet below the stage level, and that created all kinds of problems with sound because the pit would be out in front of the proscenium, and the sound would go up beautifully, hit the curved ceiling, fill the space, and the poor actors are stuck back on the stage, and there were no microphones at all. When I first came, it was done just with projecting. Then in 78, I think I lived through a lot of renovations in this place. So these little things right here are floor mics. So it's just a regular microphone stuck in a piece of foam. We call them mic mice because they look like mice with tails. But that helped. So you could actually hear a little better. This theater, from one side over to the other, the opening is 40 feet wide, and the height from the top of the arch down is 20 feet. This theater actually is very similar to the size of many historic Broadway theaters. Most of the Broadway theaters have an opening of about 36 or 38 feet, and the seating capacity is also pretty similar to this theater. Okay, now we're going to spend just a minute, have a drink first. We're going to talk about why we need scenery, and when you're going to design a set, what's the thought process that you need to go through in order to have a start at it. So the first step, of course, is to read the script, and that can be helpful. Sometimes authors give you a really good idea of what kind of set is needed. Sometimes a little more vague. It might say, Paris, 1983. No, okay. Are we inside, outside? Where are we in Paris? It might say something like, a quaint Victorian parlor with an arched doorway leading to the hallway up left, a marble fireplace is in the down left corner, curtains are at the windows up center, and the furniture is this and that. And it gives you details, which you then promptly ignore because you want to design your own space of what you think it should look like. But before you start putting pencil to paper and start sketching what you think the set should look like, you meet with the director, because the director might have some crazy idea like, oh, we're going to do Hamlet, but we're going to do it on a South Sea island. Okay, then you have to readjust what your thoughts are as how we're going to design this set. I never had a problem talking to the director. We had good conversations. It was me. Those were never contentious meetings. But after we figured out what the set is going to look like for a show, then you share those ideas, of course, with the costume designer, the lighting people, the prop people, all of the people that are involved in the production, so that you have a unified vision of what the set's going to look like. So a set primarily determines location. When the curtain goes up, where am I? Am I inside? Am I outside? You look at the script for what does the script demand of a room that you're in. For example, if you're going to do Neil Simon's Odd Couple, the opening scene and other scenes have the friends playing poker at a card table. Well, obviously you can't stand up playing poker, so you need to provide tables and chairs so that that works. There has to be a kitchen door, it has to be a front door. So you get all the clues from reading and rereading the script to figure out what is it that this play needs. The audience also can use their imagination a lot. A number of us went a couple weeks ago to see a production of Spitfire Grill, and that was a perfect example of how the audience can fill in the boxes. So they had a couple of people carrying sticks that became a forest, or they turned them in a certain way, and it became a double hung window that the actress opened. So you don't need to fill in all the blanks for the audience. Windows. Does the window, speaking of windows, do you need windows? Sometimes you can get away with having no windows, and if the actor is supposed to look out the window, they walk to the front of the stage, look through the proscenium opening, and they're looking through the window, but it's not really there. Does light need to come through the window? Is it a casement window? Is it a double hung window? Are there curtains on the window? Can you just hang a little frame of wood suspended from wires and that's the window? So all these decisions have to be made. Designers also have to determine very practical things like doors. What kind of doors? What do they look like? Is it a swinging door? Is it a pocket door? Does the actor have to slam the door? And if he pounds on the door, do you have to make it sturdy enough so that the rest of the walls don't shake? My favorite was none at all. And my crew loved me whenever I designed a set that had no doors. So you have maybe a living room with steps to a hallway. The front door is off somewhere. The kitchen and the bedrooms are off the other way, but you don't have to build any stupid doors because they never are easy to hang. Stage doors are jinxed, I think. Seating options. Are they going to stand all night, or are there benches, tables, sofas? Are you going to have platforms? If you're watching a play, if you were the audience and the stage was up here, if I put a platform, even 6 inches, 8 inches up at the back of the stage, the people standing on that platform are more visible. And so platforms are handy things to have if you've got, especially a deep stage. Reading the script, you figure out cast size. How many people are in the space? If it's a 2-person show, you can get by with a lot smaller space, obviously. I remember when we did a couple musicals, we had to calculate the square footage that each actress needed because they had hoop skirts on. So we built a little platform rolling thing and said, okay, there's 8 girls up there. The steps need to be, they need this much room in order to function. And I also remember we rented costumes for a show that was set in the 1700s. And when the rented costumes came, they had farthingales. Okay, a farthingale is like a hoop skirt that's flat in the front, flat in the back, but it's got big old hips. Okay, think Marie Antoinette. Okay, and so we had built this lovely little love seat that these 2 women were supposed to sit on. First dress rehearsal, we're in trouble. They don't fit. They didn't fit through the doors. They had to screw through sideways. Oh, yeah. Lesson learned. You can create mood with your set, your tools of color, texture, fabric choices, lighting, what style of furniture. All these are things that have to go through your head for every single show. There is the one set show, which is definitely a popular type of play. Producers love them, whether it's on Broadway or a community theater, because you build the set once, done, it's there. Nobody has to move it, and it can be made sturdy, and it's a lot cheaper. So there are playwrights who know that, and in order to sell their plays, oh, it's a one-set show with only 5 people in it. Ooh, we can make money on this one. So that's a consideration. You also have to think in terms of what can the stage crew, your builders or set people, what's their capabilities? Do you have people that can, weld things together? No, probably not. Civic theater, in the small theater, always prided itself on having the set done before the first rehearsal, which is unheard of. But we had the space and we had the time that nobody else used that small theater. So we would build the set, and sometimes people would come in for auditions and, oh, the set's done. That's like, in theater, that doesn't happen. In fact, there's a classic stage manager warning on dress rehearsal night to the actors, don't lean on the walls, the paint's still wet. That's a very common thing. So if it's not a one set show, it needs to shift. And so you have to think about, where does it go? So on our big stage, we had a couple options. A set piece could go through the doorway into the hallway. The two stages were back to back, and so you could roll pieces of scenery from one stage into the other to store it. But you have to figure out where are you going to put all the stuff, especially if there's a lot of sets. Musicals are notorious for having multiple locations and tons of scenery. When I was teaching, I was a member of USITT, which is the United States Institute of Theater Technology, and what happened is they would give workshops in Chicago, and my friend and I would go in for the weekend, and they would have like backstage tours of road companies. So I got to go snoop around backstage of the Phantom of the Opera set. Let me tell you how cool that was. It was a crowded, tons of stuff, and detail, pretty amazing. But at the opening of that show, there's this big elephant in an opera number. What do you do with an elephant? I mean, this thing was huge. And so you walk backstage, and off on the corner, winched up was an elephant. And then they lower it down. The same in ragtime, Coalhouse Walker has a Model T Ford that he drives on stage. It's used only a couple times, but when it wasn't on stage, they winched it up over the actors' heads down left. Yeah, it was pretty exciting to see those things. So for tech rehearsals, you have to choreograph all the movement, figure out what goes first, what goes second. You can use wagons, which are low platforms with scenery built on them. You can use your fly system to raise and lower scenery up and down. If you're the Guthrie Theater, you have a lot of toys to play with. You have a trapdoor, elevators that can go to the basement, and a big backstage space. So you can really, spend a lot of money. Does the set have to be changed in full view of the audience, or is it going to be a blackout? So the old traditional way of doing things was there would be a scene, particularly in the old musicals. There would be a scene, and you have a blackout, and then the scenery would change in the dark, and then the lights would come up, and life would go on. They also had a technique called the in-one section. So they would drop a curtain down, so there was a narrow piece of stage, a little scene would go on while all kinds of craziness was going on upstage while they're getting the next scene ready. So these are all things that have to go, through your head as you're trying to figure out how am I going to make this thing flow. Today's musicals are written more in like a movie flow, so the scenes just kind of flow from one to the next. So there's a whole lot of things to consider. Moving on. One of my first plays at Memorial. Sure, let's build a two-story house. What the heck? Why not? So it was about a family that was being held hostage. But then I realized that the previous theater people really hadn't left much in as far as props and scenery, and so we had to go from scratch. Our neighbors thought we were moving because our living room appeared on the set. In fact, there are a number of shows where furniture transferred from our house or somebody else's house because there wasn't anything there. Oh, also a warning, if you ever invited me over to dinner, I was mentally taking inventory of everything you had in your house. Oh, you've got a really nice tea cart on wheels. Ooh, that's a really good fake plant you got in the corner there. It may be borrowed sometime. Okay, I want to show you this one just because of the size consideration. This is a play by Alan Ackburn called Bedroom Farce. 3 simultaneous bedrooms, so the light flips back and forth between the scenes that are going on in the 3 houses. So the center bedroom is lifted up on a small platform to help delineate the 3 rooms, but all of our friends were very good about donating their guest rooms for about a month because we needed a lot of beds. This is a picture of a batten, a scenery batten, which is nothing more than a 40-foot long pipe that you can hang backdrops, curtains, set pieces, stage lights, So the system works like a teeter-totter. So you can put a curtain or whatever. In fact, it's kind of like tying your shoes 40 times when you put a curtain on a pipe. And then over on the left are all these ropes and pulleys, and there's counterweights. And so it's like balancing. If you put a heavy piece of scenery on the pipe, you have to balance it with these cast iron weights on the counterweight system. And then when you're taking it off, be careful that you're balancing it and you don't go flying up to the grids. Yeah, that's all I need to say about that. This is the set for Fiddler on the Roof. The textured stone walls are just paper mache. At this point, we're still pretty low budget. And the shingles on the roof are pieces of cardboard. So the problem with that set, though, of Tevye's house is that it's only used, I think, twice in the whole show. And so what do you do with that big honkin' thing when the rest of the time you need a big open stage? So what we did, this is a construction phase, we flew it. So connected to, you can't see it very well. But
There's one.
Here and here, there's like aircraft cables. It's like wire braided rope, heavy duty stuff. There's a very safe way of doing this. But there were a lot of cables that lifted it up into the fly loft. So all night long, the actors are carrying on and doing their show with this, probably 2,000 pound hunk of house hanging over their heads. We also had to put this ladder inside the house. So up here at the top, we of course have our Fiddler on the Roof for the opening number. And then he crawled down and the house flew away and life went on. Sometimes you wonder, what is a playwright thinking when they ask you to build something that's used for 5 minutes? So this is the opening scene of a musical, Bye Bye Birdie. You've got all these teenagers gossiping on the phone, and then that thing flies out and never seen again until the next performance. So that's what we did. We fastened it to the weight system and flew it out of the way. So typically, my schedule was teaching theater classes all day, and if there weren't enough kids signed up for a theater class, I'd have an occasional 11th grade English class thrown in. But I had a beginning and advanced level acting class, a course in theater literature and history, and a technical theater and a set construction class. So that was the day, and then day number 2 started at 3:30, when I'd have rehearsal from 3:30 to 5:30, and then at 6:30 until 9, I'd be back building scenery, and then I'd go home, rinse and repeat. Early arrival the next day for starting it all over again. So in order to see my family, we often had what we called Diane's dinner theater, where she would bring the 2 kids and some food down for dear old dad. And it wasn't just set construction, there were also stage rentals. It was a big, beautiful theater in the community, and so it was used for concerts and beauty pageants and dance recitals and you name it. If the door was open, I was there. So in order to see my kids, I often employed a little nepotism. This is Music Man, and our son Jeff was in 3rd grade, and I needed somebody to play Winthrop, who was Marion the librarian's younger brother. So there he was, easy to cast. Come on and play with Dad. Erica also was in the show. She was in 1st grade at the time, and she was one of the townspeople. Although she did have her stage debut at age 1, where she played the part of a baby in a play. Yeah. So they were also orphans when we did Oliver, and even the family dog made an appearance in one show. So I did get to see my family a little bit. This is a play called Design for Murder. And again, Jeff, as a junior, cast once again. So we had a curved staircase going up to the 2nd floor. But the story about this set is that that railing, which is painted to try to paint it to look like marble, is something that I rescued from my father's church. My dad was a minister in a northern Minnesota town, and they were renovating the sanctuary, and they were going to throw out the communion railing. I said, no, 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 no. That railing appeared in many productions. It was a pirate ship railing in Pirates of Penzance. It's in a terrace of a balcony. Yeah, it's still, parts of it has been assembled and reassembled various times. But the premise of this show is, and the set design problem, was the big window at the back. All night, the cast is talking about the beautiful view out this window and how the house is up on a cliff and it's, you know, very scary and just drops off right outside the window. And so the person who's the murderer ends up committing suicide at the end of the show by jumping through the window to his death. So the first thing we had to do is make sure that when he jumped through the window that he didn't die. So we hauled the pole vault pit down from the track department, and so that was a safe landing. But then we had the problem of the breakaway glass. So we said, well, you know, they make breakaway glass. You can buy that. You use in movies all the time, you know, bottles that crash. And then we looked at how expensive that was. Well, plan B. Then we read that, well, you could make your own breakaway glass. It's sugar and some water, and you put it on a cookie sheet, you bake it in the oven for a while. Well, that was the stickiest mess that, no. Plan C, plexiglass squares with the edges rounded off, and then every night we rebuilt the mullions of the window with balsa wood and hot glue. So after he jumped through it at the end of the night, we would get out more wood and more hot glue and put the window back together, ready for the next show. But it was a really dramatic ending of the play, I must say. Where are we at here? Oh yeah, but even with the best organization, sometimes things don't go quite right all the time. Yeah, that happens frequently when you're directing high school theater. All right, let's look at this picture. Construction for the play Harvey, which is about a guy who has a 6-foot invisible rabbit. Oh, but before we talk about the show, let's talk about some other stuff backstage here. See over here, these cafeteria tables, and a podium, and an overhead projector. That was my classroom for many years because the school was getting very crowded and I had to give up my classroom across the hall. I said, oh, I'll teach on the stage, not a problem. It was a problem because like here, we're building scenery and sawing wood. Every night I would be dusting everything off so that I could have class the next day. So the tables would roll up into the hallway, and then when the set got too big and there wasn't enough room to have class, I'd have class out in the front seats of the auditorium. Yeah, you just go with the flow. All right, so let's talk about Harvey. So the play is basically a back and forth between two set locations. There's the Dowd family living room, and then there's a psychiatrist's office because the sister is trying to get Elwood committed because he's nuts with his rabbit. And so if we did it by just bringing in furniture and changing furniture all night, the set changes would have been interminable. So we said, we're gonna build a revolving stage. So it's a 26-foot diameter platform on casters that when you turn it around, let's see what I got here. So here's the Dowd living room. And here's me turning the set so that part 2 is the office. And so the lights would go down, 10 seconds later they go up and the set was changed. The audience goes, ooh, how they do that? Well, the wheel is your friend when you're in the theater. It definitely is. Here's an example of painting two-dimensional walls to try to make them look like they're three-dimensional stone. And I can't tell you how many times with sponges and feather dusters and all that sort of thing that we went over and over those walls. So this is Man of La Mancha. And the storyline is that Cervantes, who's the author of Don Quixote, is thrown into prison by the Inquisition, and he brings a trunk of props down that staircase every night, and then the staircase was connected with cables, and it was hinged up at the top to that top platform, and so the staircase would lift up, and the prisoners would be trapped in the prison below. So I had to have a student sit in the orchestra pit with a drum thing with a handle with some chains on it to make, sound effects as the thing was going up. The glamour of the theater. Yes, that's my job, turning the chains. So the staircase is a 20-foot long 2x12 with steps, and there were no hand railings, and I was so happy every night when the trunk made it to the bottom of the stairs. This is a play called Life with Father. We dyed a lot of kids' hair red for that show because it was a family that the plot had these redheaded kids, and so there were a number of them. I don't want to rinse, so I had to do it. So we would dye them, and there were a lot of redheaded kids running around that fall. The pattern on the wall is for the wallpaper. It was a single pattern cut out of like masonite, and then I hand sponged every one of those things going down, and then, it was a lot. But the pattern is large because the theater is large, so you have the problem of scale. You couldn't have little tiny flowers on the wallpaper because nobody would see it. But I think it went a little over the top with size on this one. We also painted the floor after every show. Lots of layers of paint on the floor. There was also a technique we used for wallpaper. It was like a roller that had a sponge roller that you would load with paint, and then next to it was a rubber roller that had a pattern in it. So you would load the sponge with paint, crawl to the top of the flat, and these are 12-foot walls, and you're pushing the rubber roller on the wall, and as you're going down the ladder, trying to keep it straight, and then moving over 6 inches and doing it again, rinse and repeat, and again and again. But it really was a good way to do wallpaper. This is Agatha Christie's The Hollow, and I wanted to look, it was like a mystery play. I wanted it to look like a 1950s black and white movie. And so all of the costumes, all of the props, the bookcase is filled with every black and white covered book from the school library. I made sure that when they served the sandwiches, they cut the bread crusts off because they were brown, so that we didn't have any black, any brown on the set. I reupholstered that sofa. That was one of many sofas that I've reupholstered in my life. This is a set model for Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, which was my last show at the high school. Set models can be very helpful. I built one for every set I designed for the Civic Theater. The directors liked it. They could visualize what the space was going to look like. The crew liked it because, that's where the door goes. It was easier to understand what it was going to look like. And so my final show at Memorial was Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, but I set it in Times Square. It's like Hamlet on the South Sea Island, right? So all of those show posters were hand painted by the students. So we had an overhead projector, and we traced the thing and then painted all those. And we tried to bring in some New York themes. So when Joseph gets thrown into prison, the prison guards are New York City cops. When he arrived in his chariot of gold, it was a New York City yellow cab. And on it went. It was just a gimmick. Where are we at? The problem with this show is there's a lot of lumber in that set. And I went way over budget, but I was retiring. And I was always much better at asking forgiveness than permission when I was a theater teacher. All right, now we're going to shift over to the small stage and some of the shows that I was directed for Beloit Civic Theater. So this stage is only 20 feet wide, 20 feet deep. It has no fly loft. The ceiling is about this tall, 11 feet, so it's just a box. But arsenic and old lace, and there's yours truly as Officer O'Hara in the middle. The storyline is that these two sweet ladies poison these lonely men and then bury them in the cellar. And then their brother thinks he's Teddy Roosevelt and he's burying them in the Panama Canal. Oh, it goes on and on. But there were a lot of set requirements for this show. For example, every time Teddy went up the staircase, it was like he was charging San Juan Hill. So the staircase has to be, sideways. Otherwise, if he's going towards the back of the wall, it wouldn't work. But the problem is you can only go up so far before you hit your head on the ceiling. So if you were 6 feet tall or under, you were okay. You kind of grazed your head when you got to the top of those stairs, and then immediately you would come back down again. So we're going to flip back and forth here. So this is a floor plan. Excuse me. So this is the outer wall of the stage. So there's a hallway door here that went into the big stage, and then you could squeeze around the back if you needed to come in through the cellar door, but it was more convenient to go out into the hallway, around, and then back in. So you got steps going up, 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 and then down, 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 down. There's a swinging door to the kitchen, the cellar door. The brother had to bring in the dead body through the casement window. The body had to go in the window seat. The ladies had to, where's it at here? Oh, this platform right here. There was a window here, so the two sisters at one point have to peek out that window. There were just a lot of details. You go through the script, okay? This has to be there, that has to be here. You have to think through all of these details. The kitchen or dining room table could only be 24 inches, like this size table, because you had a big cast and you had a lot of people that had to be on the cast at the same time. Okay, what else? Yeah, Victorian sets are fun to do.
That's great.
Okay. Here I am in Death Trap. So the set design for this one, it was supposed to be a carriage house, and there was a whole bunch of business about how the people would hit their head on these beams all the time. So we had to create this sort of beamed look for the room. This collection of weapons was a critical part of the flow of the play. Excuse me. The hardest part of being actors in this show, there's a lot of words, of course, to learn, but there was a lot of business that was just critical for the plot. So at one point, I had to go to the desk, take out the note, crumple it up, put it in the fireplace, take a key, move it here, take a gun, put bullets in it, take a handcuff and move it here. Horrible. Nightmares. But the end of the show, I'm supposed to kill this other guy with a crossbow. And so I go to the wall of weapons, I take down the crossbow, I go onto that platform, and he's upstairs. I aim the crossbow and shoot, and then he stumbles down the stairs with an arrow in his stomach and falls dead at the bottom of the stairs. So then I go to the coffee table or the table somewhere and make a phone call saying, he's gone. But he's not dead yet. He managed to get up, pull the arrow out, come and stab me in the back, and at the end of the show, we're both dead. You don't need to go to the gym when you're at a show like that because it's just really physical, but a lot of fun. There I am, elegantly attired in my tuxedo. This shot is about how you recycle when you're in community theater. So we have a collection of walls. They're basically nothing more than 2x4 frames, either 2 feet wide, 3 feet wide, or 4 feet wide. And they're 10 feet tall, covered with quarter-inch plywood. We save them and use them over and over and over. Just hook them together in different configurations and then paint them a different color. But this particular show, somebody found this little transom window for $10 at a rummage sale, little stained glass window made out of plastic, but who knows? These three-dimensional columns here are actually vacuum formed, so it's like thin plastic painted to look like it's marble or whatever. We needed to have this door, had to look like a pocket door in a Victorian home, but if you went on the back side of the door, it was just a couple closet door tracks. You know, nobody sees what it looks like from the actor view. The problem set-wise in this show is that the woman in the wheelchair had to get around, so we couldn't have a sofa. It was a lot of space was needed, so that was a big consideration in that show. Greater tune-up. 2 men, Rob, and that's me on the right, play the entire village of Tuna, Texas. There are 14 characters in the show. Each of us had 7 people. I was a New York reporter, a radio announcer, a juvenile delinquent son with tattoos, a person from the fish and game department, 2 different, was it more than 7? It was a lot of people. So for set design, we had to make sure that the backstage was more important than what was on stage, because there were 6 openings, and you would leave as one character. There were 4 dressers, people backstage helping you change costume, and a lot of them were literally 15 seconds. So you would walk off stage, take off a trench coat, roll your pant legs down because you had a skirt on perhaps, take a wig off, put a hat on, new jacket, spin you around, throw you on stage, and there was a list of costume pieces in order. All the racks were very organized, and so the person who did the last plop of a hat would say, "You're Petey, go talk about fish," throw you out on the stage, and then you would have your little monologue about fish. It was, yeah, a lot of fun. And I inherited my skinny ankles from my mother. Okay, now, I'd like to close with a 90-second video. About 5 years ago, there was a musical called The Musical of Musicals, The Musical, which Polite Civic Theater did. And the premise was that how would different composers do the same storyline musically and, you know, thematically or whatever. And so we had a version by Rodgers and Hammerstein, Andrew Lloyd Webber, Kander and Ebb, who did Cabaret and Chicago, and then Jerry Herman, who did Hello, Dolly and Mame. So the storyline, boyfriend, girlfriend, evil landlord wants to collect the rent. That was basically the storyline. So the director said, "Loren, I really want you to be in this show." And this is about 5 years ago. I said, "You know, I'm done." You know, I don't want to drag myself down there from 7 to 10 4 nights a week. I'm really done. And so she said, "Well, what if we did a cameo? Because there's a scene where the landlord has to go off stage and then moments later reappear in full drag and do a scene as Dolly Levi in Hello, Dolly." I said, "All right, I'm in. I can do that." So there were 5 women backstage. Let's see if I can make this work now. Let me see. Okay, so this woman is one of the 5. This is the hallway leading between the stages. So I'm on stage in a tuxedo, and before I get from one stage to the next, I've taken off the bow tie and taken off the tuxedo jacket, and I have underdressed my pantyhose, and I have underdressed my rhinestone necklace that's under the costume. I'm running off the stage. Obviously, the shoes got to go, the pants have to go, the t-shirt goes. And so the ladies over on the right, the dress is on the floor. It's been laid out on the floor. So I step into it and hold my arms out so that they can pull it up. There's a long zipper in the back. As soon as the zipper is up, she says, sit. And I put my feet out because somebody's putting on my 2-inch heels. And then, let's see what else. Oh, the two ladies are putting on the long elbow length red gloves that have the rhinestone bracelets already sewn onto the gloves. And then here comes the wig. The headdress is on a head, like a headband, and it has been sewn into the wig. So when they put the wig on, the headgear is there. Makeup lady is, the rhinestone earring clip-ons are going on. The blush is going on, and lipstick. We were gonna do false eyelashes, but decided no, not enough time. So somebody's gonna grab, oh, it's already on there. My red boa is on there already. And so now I have to make sure that it's sturdy because I'm about to go do a big song and dance number. And then I had to duck through the door because I was too tall. And then, there we are. Yours truly. So on a side note, with a lot of help from Diane, I did a lot of the sewing on that dress, including putting in the long zipper in the back. There you go. That's my life on the Wicked stage. Thank you very much. Anybody have any questions? Wait, I went way over. Questions? Yes, sir.
What is the most humorous faux pas that you are acquainted with?
That I personally went, scary moments or faux pas? I fell in the orchestra pit a few times. One time I didn't hurt myself, and then, I ended up being hauled off to the hospital ER because I had backed into, well, you know when you're painting sometimes. I was painting Miss Hannigan's office for Annie, and I was texturing the woodwork. And it's better just to do it with your hands, play with the paint and do the wood grain. And so I've got brown paint on my hands. I go out in the audience to see, okay, what does this look like from a distance? And I'm backing up the aisle, and I fell on one of the armrests of the seat, which broke a front rib, which caused me to go into shock. So I managed to crawl up to the orphan bed, and the ambulance came. So that wasn't fun. I broke ribs couple times, and then it's opening night and all the cast wants to hug you, and it's like, it hurts. There's lots of silly stories. I remember watching Life with Father. There was a scene where there were three different scenes where they were having breakfast, and we're in Act 1, and all of a sudden the lines are from Act 3, and I'm like, how are they going to dig out of this one? And so they're passing food around, and the people who have to enter the scene are off stage figuring, how the heck do we come? We're just going to come in and get back, and yeah. So that kind of stuff happens all the time. Yeah. Fun, never dull, and every show is different. You never know how it's going to end. Yeah. Anybody else have a curiosity? Yes?
Oh, that was every single scene was fabulous. How did you learn to do all this stuff? You're just a high school teacher.
A lot of it was just learn as you go, because I didn't major in theater. I mean, I had like one set construction class in college, so I had to learn how to, build and do all that design.
He's creative.
Yeah.
Very creative.
I think a lot. But, those workshops in Chicago were amazing. They would have conferences where they would have to show you the latest technology, and you're like a sponge, And then technology changed. I mean, we went from no microphones to, wireless body mics and LED lighting, new light boards. The old light board when I moved in looked like it came out of one of those Frankenstein movies. It was an old auto transformer board, big old handles that you'd grab. You'd have to use your feet to bring it all down, and then you didn't know if it really turned the lights out because you were backstage. You couldn't see what you were doing. And then we went to, electronic boards. Yeah, it was a lot. a lot to learn. And you just pick up, on the way. Yeah, you just need to do it because and for a lot of the time, the early years, I was pretty much a one-man show. I was the builder. I did everything. I don't even remember what it was, mid-'80s. One of my friends who was an excellent carpenter joined the staff, and from that point on, the set quality control and building techniques improved greatly because he was a great carpenter and there was never a wiggly wall on an Eric set. He was really amazing. Yeah. Yes.
Oh, and when we see a show like the Spitfire Cafe that we saw last weekend, are you thinking a mile a minute? Well, I would
of course.
do this, and I would do that.
You are always, I'm kind of a pain to go to the theater with because I'm always turning around looking at the lights, what are they doing, trying to figure out how they did that. For a number of years on the side, I did theater tours. I took people into Chicago for an afternoon and out to a nice dinner. So when Lion King, I did 18 trips to Lion King.
Oh.
And so by the end, I would follow one of the ensemble people, like this little person over here. Okay, now you're going backstage here, you're changing into a hyena costume. I know you're going to come out over here. And so that's what I do sometimes, is I look behind the scenes, try to figure out how it's all done. Yeah.
And when you see a set like we saw in that Guthrie history play, Shakespeare history plays,
I drool.
are you thinking a mile a minute? Well, I'd do that.
The Guthrie, they have a welding shop. I mean, those sets are made out of metal and unlimited budget, but amazing. It was a rotating thing that it would turn like 20 degrees, and it's a new thing. It's crazy creative. I love it. I love it. Yeah, and I love going to shows that are, big, huge, spectacular things where there's all kinds of technical stuff. And then I like going to a play where there's two guys on a bench talking. That's also exciting. Yeah, it just depends on, the show. Every show is different. But it's amazing. I've seen different productions of the same play in my career, different people doing it, and it amazes me how different the visual look can be for the same play, how things can be shifted around and done completely differently. But that's what theater is. It's live theater, and it's somebody's creative idea about how are we going to make this work for this show. Yeah, fun stuff. Yes, sir.
Yes, you obviously had a great joy in what you did.
Yeah.
And thanks for sharing that with us. It was incredible.
It was a good career, but I retired early. I went out at 55 because I was tired. I mean, you can only do those 18-hour days for so long, and then you say, oh, I can't do it anymore. Yeah, crawling around on the floor and building stuff. Yeah. Yes. Okay.
Did Beloit have the kind of support community theater has here in
Yes, the theater program, when I got there was a history of a really good, strong theater program. So I came into that, and I was very nervous because I hadn't really done all of that.
You didn't know much.
You just do what you got to do. But I, had a lot of amazing kids to work with, and the community. A lot of those shows were sold out. Where we only did like 3 performances of the musical, but to have 1,500 people sitting in a theater, it's pretty cool. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah. All right. Anybody else? Yes.
I just wonder, you talk about a lot of different productions. So you have total freedom from the playwright or the author or the
No.
estate or whatever?
Well, it depends on what you're talking about.
Okay.
If you're talking about the words, like Neil Simon, for example, every single word has to be said exactly the way it's in the script. You cannot do any cutting at all. The visual look of the show, the style, the kind of costumes you do, and that is totally up to each individual production. But the words are sacred. You don't mess with the words. Yeah.
Talk about the swearing.
Oh, yes. So I was in a production of a Neil Simon show where the director was, pretty straight-laced and said, there were a lot of F words in the show. And our audience was a small community theater and said, they're not going to handle this real well. And so she made the announcement at auditions that, we're just going to clean that up a bit. Well, one of the ladies, we think this is what happened, one of the ladies who was not cast sort of went on a vendetta thing and wrote Samuel French, which is the licensing company, and said, the licensing theater is cutting all the F words in Neil Simon's play. We got a really nasty letter from Sam French's lawyers saying, you will perform the show as written. But by golly, if you just forget lines sometimes when you're on stage. Oops. So we might have said a few, but we didn't say 23, and our audience has survived. Yeah, but it's when you have a script, like for a musical, it's very expensive. You're paying royalty fees, and so for most musicals, it's calculated on the size of the theater and your ticket prices and how many shows you're doing. But it was about $3,000 just for the rights to do the show, and then you have to have your sets and your costumes. And if you've got, like a show Music Man, we had like 48 people in the show, and you can't send them all naked. You gotta have clothes for all those people. Yeah. So Diane tells a story. That was her worst nightmare show. There were 38 loads of wash. It lasted a long time. Doing the laundry.
1 month.
1 month. Yeah, it took. Yeah. But,
All right.
yes.
How many of the plays that you built a set for did you act in?
Oh, that's a good question.
A lot.
Quite a few, yeah. I did every set for the last 22 years, 3 a year. And before that, when I was still teaching, I wasn't as involved with the set construction because I was doing my own thing. But even though I was acting or doing stuff on the main stage, there were a lot of shows that I acted in. Did I direct? I don't think I ever directed until I retired.
Yeah, you directed.
Oh, you
John
directed everyone.
Yeah, no, not everyone. Yeah, there's only so many hours in the day. Yeah, yeah, I did. Yeah, I really don't have a number of how many shows I directed, but I was in a lot of them too. And it was a great deal of fun working with fun people, but it's a lot of hours, and learning words. So I had an app on my phone that lets you read the lines and record your line and then leave a space so that you could walk around the track listening to the lines and talking to myself, walking the track over and over. But there was one show called Moonlight and Magnolias. I was the director of Gone with the Wind, and I had locked up people in my office, the 2 playwrights, and fed them only bananas and peanuts until they came up with the right scene for Gone with the Wind. And there was, when you get a script, you get a yellow highlighter out and you highlight your lines and then leave the others blank, and then you just see yellow. Those are the things I need to learn. There was like a 3-page thing that was all yellow. And then in that show, I also had to change. I had this big long monologue, and I had to change from one suit into another suit, right down to underwear, tie a tie, and finish the line exactly at the moment when I hit the doorknob and walked out the door. That was hard. That was hard.
I do that every day.
Trying to talk and put your clothes on at the same time. I do not talk when I put my clothes on. All right, anybody else? Well, thanks for coming. Yeah.